Hey guys, this is Nathan. Forgive my voice. I'm recovering from some allergies here. Beekeepers do get allergies. But I've had some requests from some other beekeepers on how I winterize my bees for the winter. So I've already done this one right here, and we're going to be working on this one right here. And I'm going to show you guys what I do to prepare my bees for winter. It's not that complicated, but there is quite a few steps. There's a lot of prep work, but I found a lot of success over the years getting my bees through winter using this method. Anyway, I hope you learned something, and enjoy the video. So this right here is a pollen patty. This is not the winter variety, but there are winter varieties. This is just early November for us here in the South Plains region. I find that pollen patties are still pretty useful this time of the year going into winter, just to kind of help the bees get some winter brood going. So we'll be putting this in the hive. But the big thing is the candy board. That's what this is. So this is a homemade candy board. I made it out of a 2x3. You can't see it, but there is a supportive beam here because it's going to hold a lot of weight. This holds about 16 pounds of sugar, and I've never had a beehive go through all 16 pounds all through winter, but I've seen them get close. So 16 seems to be a good mark to shoot for insurance. On the bottom of these things, it's held by wax paper on the bottom, which I do rake open so they can feed from the bottom. But it's also held by some chicken wires to support the weight of the sugar. And then I mold in holes for the bees to be able to crawl up through from their hive. This will go on top of their hive, but I make sure that there's 3 holes that they can come in and feed on this. But one of the interesting things that I did not anticipate that's been really helpful with these candy boards is they're really good at absorbing condensation. So condensation is something that the bees have to deal with in winter. So they thermoregulate their hive when it's really cold. They'll ball up in the hive, and when it's cold and wet and they're thermoregulating the hive, you get a lot of condensation in the hive. So just to kind of give you a visual, this will be the hive we'll be working on today. Hopefully the ladies will be nice. So the bees will be predominantly down in here, okay? Or we can go to this one. This is one that's already winterized. So the bees will ball up in the center when it gets really cold. And when it's cold and wet, it will condensate inside the hive, and that condensation will stick to everything inside. And during cold weather, bees can handle cold and dry very well. What they don't handle well is cold and wet. So condensation is something that we have to worry about. A lot of beekeepers will find ways to introduce various kinds of ventilation, but with a candy board, especially one like this one, that water gets absorbed by the sugar. It'll rise up into here. The candy board will absorb it, and it actually makes the sugar softer for them to consume. Right now it's pretty hard. This is more of a fondant, okay? So this is a mixture of 16 pounds of sugar with 3 cups of water and 1 tablespoon of vinegar. And the vinegar is to help it from not molding. But it's pretty solid. So when that condensation rises, it'll actually soften that sugar to where they can consume it more easily. So not only does it deal with your condensation well, but it actually makes it easier for them to eat as well. Now, after the candy boards go on, I will remove all the honey super boxes. Excuse me, fingers kind of messing up. So the supers, or the boxes above the hive body, those are going to get removed. And there's a major reason for that is that honey's already been harvested. I just put the boxes back on for the bees to kind of clean up the frames. But those will come off. For the main reason why is so the bees don't have to have as much room to heat during the winter. So we take it off. There's nothing really in it but wax at this point. So the less room that they have in their hive, like in this example, The less room that they have to heat, the less energy they need to exert to heat their hive. The more room that you have available to them, the more they have to heat. So reducing the space in the winter is quite important, even for big hives. Big hives, they're going to start reducing. So one of the cool things that bees do, I say cool, but some people may not find this cool, is at the entrance here, the bees don't keep their dead. They dispose of them. And you'll see piles of dead bees down here. That's a clear indication that winter has arrived and they're preparing for winter. And all the hives are doing this right now. So you see the pile of dead bees here. So the hive will reduce in size for the winter. So with a larger hive, with less bees, that's difficult to keep heated. So reducing the space is important. So we're going to remove those boxes on top there. And then once those boxes are removed and all the food, the pollen patty, and the candy board are installed, we'll then wrap the hive with some insulation. Okay, this is just some styrofoam that I like to wrap around the boxes. It just kind of blocks the wind from the cracks that there might be in the hive, but it also is able to retain some of the heat that the bees are generating. Again, it's trying to reduce the effort that they have to exert to keep their hive warm. I get asked sometimes by other beekeepers, why do I take all the honey out of the hive? There's still some honey down in the hive body. Kind of a rule of thumb for a lot of beekeepers is they always leave at least one full super, that's the honey box above the hive body, of honey for the winter each year. I used to do that, and it caused two problems. One of the issues was the honey out here in West Texas, especially in the cotton area, the honey crystallizes very quickly. Usually by December, it's already hard as a rock. And the bees consume a lot less of it because it's not really in a shape that they can just consume readily when it's really, really cold. They can really only consume it whenever it's warm enough for them to go up into the hive body out of their ball. But when they're balled up, they need easy access to food. So that's one thing. And another thing too is you're still increasing the size of the hive body. That has to be thermal regulated at a higher resource level. So they need to, but still reducing the space helps the overall survivability as long as you're keeping enough food in the hive. Like I said, there's still usually 2 to 4 frames of honey during the winter in the hive body, which is not usually enough to get through winter. However, by reducing the space, they're using less energy to keep the hive heated, and the honey is not crystallizing on them. So I actually take all the honey. That's where I'm probably a little bit different than a lot of other beekeepers, and I know people will disagree with me on this, but I've actually had higher success rates by using the candy boards and the pollen patties over just leaving a full super in this area particularly. I do not think I would do that if I lived up north in the Dakotas or Canada, let's say Ohio, where it gets really cold for long periods of time. And the type of honey that those bees are making aren't crystallizing as fast. So I think this is more of a region specific that I do. And I just wanted to answer that question in case it came up. Since I'm taking all the honey supers off, there's no reason for the queen excluder. For those of you that aren't beekeepers, We utilize this to keep the queen in the lower part of the box, so she can't come up into the honey supers where we harvest honey to lay eggs. So this is wide enough for the normal bees to come up through. However, the queen is too big. She can't fit through these slats. All right, our queen is right here with the yellow dot. So going into winter, that's a good sign that she's still alive. Now, queens don't naturally come with a dot at the top of their thorax. We as beekeepers put those on the queens to help find her in the thickness of all these bees. So now that I know she's good and healthy, I'll put her back, and then we can go ahead and continue our feeding process. So I'm going to lay the pollen patty. I like to do the patty kind of away from the center during the winter specifically. I don't necessarily do this in the spring, but in the winter I do. They're already feeding on it, so they're definitely hungry. And I kind of mash it down to let it form. And we're about to put a candy board on top of this, and I don't want it lopsided. So it looks like this, and I do rake it to kind of open it up. It's just wax paper, and then the candy board will go right on top. All right. Just kind of level it out. So we have the high body, candy board, candy on top, pollen patties inside. I do drill a hole here with some hardware cloth to kind of cover it. Bees cannot come in and out here, but I do allow some ventilation here, even in the winter, to go through here. And then kind of the last thing I'll do is we're going to reduce this entrance here. So what I do is I can't do this without both hands, but I will pop this open. There is a smaller notch on a different part of the wood that I'll rotate, and I'll make this entrance smaller. That way less cold air can come in. It also makes, since this hive will be reducing in size, it will make it to where it's easier for the guard bees to guard the entrance. You can see the smaller notch here. And there we go. So now the entrance has been reduced. The bees can still come in and out, but it's a lot easier for them to defend when there's less of them throughout the winter. Let's go ahead and get the inner cover put on and the lid, and we'll be done with this. Oh, we'll almost be done with this hive. All right, you see this guy? We don't like those. They actually eat bees and they eat the same food, so we always kill those guys when we see them. And the last piece before I put the lid on is the insulating board. And that's what I do to winterize my bees. You can see they still have access to their entrance here, even with this on. And it's nice and flush with the candy board. Even here, it comes up over the candy board. And that's it. You guys are more than welcome to send me direct messages if you have questions. But this is what I started doing about 3 years ago, and I've had a lot of success with this method. Anyway, hope you all have a good day. Bye-bye. So one little detail I forgot to mention is I also give wind barriers using hay bales at the entrance here. This helps, surprisingly, with snow, any kind of heavy wind that comes through that might be hitting the hives. It's always good to have a barrier for your bees during the winter.